Well, the lantern is lit, the extra flags are hanging by the door, so it must be time for an operating session. I have not had one since February of 2025. I've made a lot of minor things that if you looked at the railroad, you'd say, did you do anything? But there's about 12 different things I have added to operations on the layout. And so tonight, a group of us that are going to the N-Scale convention in June are getting together. We're going to talk about food, last minute travel plans, and kind of finalize some things for our trip. And then we're going to try out some of these things on the layout just to see how they work. Hopefully kind of debug the railroad if there's any problems, or say, this works good, or yeah, these things need some rework. So I hope you enjoy the video. So a couple of the changes I made to hopefully improve the layout's appearance and even just performance for the operators was having a spot for binder clips. I use a lot of binder clips when it comes to kind of the waybills, the pack that people can put in their nail aprons for operating a train. But sometimes when they come to a yard and they're no longer going to have a train and they have an empty binder clip, they might be found laying anywhere. And well, unfortunately, we've had by accident some of these lay across the rail, and you can imagine that short circuits the railroad real quick. And so I've got a couple different spots just for housing binder clips so that they kind of all get nestled in one spot. So there's one at this end of the yard, there's one down at that end of the yard, and then I have one underneath the Grinnell yard. So hopefully that will help. In addition, I also took the Micromart 5-slot waybill boxes, and the problem that we were having is they don't come with any kind of tray. So last year I fabricated just a couple simple trays underneath all the waybill boxes. And then this is just some shower edging that you would use for like a surround shower. Now, I will say these need to be sanded down because I have caught my shoulder or rub up against them. So these need to just be kind of rounded off a little bit so they're not quite so sharp. They are just kind of stuck on there. So if somebody does catch it and it pulls off, it's real easy to snap back on. And then I've added just a little PVC pipe for track picks, pencils, and then obviously it's really nice to have that edge there. So when you are setting out cars, I should say, or cards, putting your waybill packets, the binder clips will fit there. Just basically does the job of holding it instead of setting stuff on the layout and have it lay across the layout. And that obviously, as the layout comes along further and further with detail, the less you're putting on the layout is obviously going to be helpful. So these have been nice. And once I get them all done, I'm actually thinking of doing a light sanding and then painting the whole thing, a white color or something like that, so they really kind of stand out. So the other neat item that's been added are these little flagmen. I have them both in the red and then the blue. And I've seen these on layouts at the N-Scale convention and so it's just kind of neat to put on there to protect the end of your train, or if a train's coming up behind you, that crews are on the lookout for it. These are obviously the DCC version, and they just pick up power from the track, real easy to solder and put together. And then I've named all my guys after people on the crew and that. So just adds another little element of interest for the layout. I mean, yes, the layout is also signaled, and I also have the portable fusees to put down. So just another little element to add to operations. So another feature that has been added is this hill brake. I've done a video on it previously, but this will be the first time it's actually used with a crew. So just some general instructions on what we do with the hill brake and what not to do and how to use it. And then this was just a good old lawnmower type choke mechanics for the hill brake. So when cars come up against that yellow post, Obviously they don't roll since I have a pretty good grade that comes down off the siding into this little scrap metal warehouse junkyard. And so then when they need access, obviously you just pull it out. Cars and locomotives and that are able to roll through there, do its pickups, set outs and that. And then obviously when a train leaves, we want to put it back on the up position. So this has been kind of a fun thing to have added to the railroad. The same summer I added the hill brake. I also added just this little extra spur here along the front of the railroad. Malcolm can get clogged up, it seems like, very easily with having a fertilizer dealer down at the end. We got a small lumber yard, kind of a little track transfer warehouse, and then the grain elevator. And so we have the passing siding and main line right here, and sometimes there's just no place to set a few other cars for like the local. So I cut this switch in here and just have this spur run along the front. And that definitely has added a little extra space to put cars or tuck things out of the way when switching here. Still a work in progress, but coming right along is developing a little bit for Ascalon, kind of making a switching puzzle here. So Ascalon, the depot, is pretty much closed, abandoned, but we've got the SW1 switcher that can still service the grain elevator. We have another little transfer building that's in the process of being built. A spur track that would represent this track continuing down to what was some poor Iowa coal mines and that. So that'll be kind of filled in with some trees and that to kind of disappear a little bit. I need to touch up the backdrop because I obviously cut out some of the scenery in the back to make room for the elevator. But then also the switch engine could be a job that also goes down where the hill brake is to that industry there. So kind of just a nice little portion of the railroad right in here that will eventually develop into a job. So still work in progress, but kind of fun. Another change is both the upper deck and lower deck were styrofoam. Obviously the lower deck is still the pink styrofoam. The upper deck, I have taken out the styrofoam and continued with Homosote that ties into the upper staging yard. In addition, the command station and that, I moved to the upper deck here, and then the main power supply, and that it's really close to the circuit break system also for the railroad. Programming track right out here in front, and then I'm gonna have a little acrylic shelf that this is going to set up on so wires and that aren't hanging over, but there'll be a set of curved switches that will come into play to do a little yard here that will be probably M&L and CB&Q shared, along with a couple curved switches coming out this way that might just give some traffic for like the Milwaukee Road and that. And so the reason I kind of did this with the Homosote is, one, the styrofoam was getting kind of chipped at and that, and I wanted something a little more permanent. But I find myself when I'm programming engines at the programming track that either I need the manual, so having the manual here, but the programming track up here seemed to make a lot of sense. And I'm also thinking in time of maybe putting a little shelf across here so that I can also have maybe my laptop sitting there, or I have the option of my laptop maybe sitting here and using like JRMI for doing programming as well. So the bottom layer will also get replaced with some Homosote this summer, but I want to add in a little more of some support here on this end, because my fear is this might get leaned on with elbows or that from crews, and so I want a little more support underneath it. And so this will have kind of a rebuild of the benchwork. The upper deck, obviously, it's a little taller, not as much elbows and stuff that are going to be pushing down or leaning against it. So it's pretty solid right now as it stands. The other item I added was a train registry sheet. I saw this on a layout that I operated in the Chicago area last fall and thought, wow, this is really cool. And so essentially crews are, when they're bringing their train out of one of the staging yards, kind of just documenting the train, their locomotive number, who the crew is, time of departure, cars, and caboose. But then as they get to another main yard, they'll fill out one there for kind of how their cars change throughout the session until that train comes back. So here, if we follow train 83 left at 2:31 a.m. with 16 cars, it's caboose. But when it finally did make it back, it was at 6:55 p.m., had 20 cars, and then the crew in that. So this was the first time using it. I'll be interested to see people's feedback on it, but it is. So on my railroad, I have a return loop that takes the trains back to the helix and that. And so they basically go through the backdrop, make a loop, and the lesson I learned from my previous layout is I didn't want the track hidden where I had to get up on a stool or anything like that and couldn't access it. So back behind here is room where the track is. So it's real easy to access cars, see it in that, without a huge backdrop in the way. The same is true back here. It just doesn't have trees or vegetation yet, is the track right there. And that is basically just the return loop going up that way to the helix. Well, another element I have is on the lower deck, it's not an issue. The track can just loop right back to it. But on the upper, I have a utility panel. And so inevitably, we know that sometime or another, people are going to have to get in, or namely myself, get into the utility panel. And so I had just a piece of flex track around there, and that worked out well. But over the years of getting in and out of that electrical cabinet, the track was starting to fail and wasn't as reliable. So last summer, I basically spliced in and put in some Kato unit track that is fixed. So when I have to pull out that section to get into my utility panel, it pretty much just stays the same. And so then all I have to do is slide the rail joiners to tie into it, which are, as they fail or break down in time, real easy to replace. And so far, when I've had to get in this in the spring and fall to like kill the access to my air conditioner, or if we've blown a circuit, it's made it a lot easier to get in and out of. So that has been a great improvement, because inevitably what would happen is if somebody was running, train would come out here and all of a sudden you'd hear the thump, 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 because it picked one of the rail joiners there. And I've noticed that has not been the case now that the Kato track has been added. So that's been a great improvement, made it a little more reliable for that upper deck. One other thing I've added is D-rings to a lot of my radio-controlled cab throttles. Inevitably, our hands get full with our waybills and trying to control a throttle, so it's really nice to have a lanyard that they can hang from. So I'm going to do an additional video sometime in the future of how I added these D-rings to my cab 6s and my hammerhead throttles. When I make the video about the D-ring, I will also cover how I use the cab savers to kind of make the thumb drive knobs on cab 6s a little more reliable and not have as much wobble to them in time when they get worn down. So we started the evening with a little pizza and discussing our plans for the N-Scale convention. This will be Bob and Connor's first N-Scale convention, Michael's third N-Scale convention, and my sixth N-Scale convention. After our planning for the N-Scale convention, it was on to the main business at hand. running trains.
So there's 3 eastbounds here looking to be.
I'm gonna have 20 cars here when I get out of Malcolm.
Your pickup is down here, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Scrapyard.
No.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. It was a great night running trains, discussing our plans for the N-Scale convention, and basically seeing the layout come to life running after not having an op session since February 2025. So thank you for watching, and happy railroading to you.